Hey, Jason.
Hey, Jen.
What are you listening to this week? Welcome to What Are You Listening To? The weekly podcast created to foster community through music by sharing the stories behind the songs that soundtrack our lives. Some of the songs are old, some new, all good. I'm Jen Tully, and this week I'm joined by Jason Garcia. Jason is one half of the synth-pop duo Jason and Brit. Jason and Brit released a 5-song EP called Survival Skills at the end of last year. And the EP deals with everything from Biden's inauguration to social distancing during the pandemic, all drenched in the sweet synth-pop beats that remind me of 80s bands like The Cars and The Human League, but with the modern sensibility of bands like Metric. We'll talk more about Jason's music, his influences, and his process in between our song picks. Also, did you know that now on Spotify, you can listen to the show with the songs we discuss incorporated? Just search for What Are You Listening To with Music. If you're not listening on Spotify, be sure to give the playlist a listen and then tune into our conversation. With that, let's get started. Jason, what are you listening to this week?
Well, this week I've been going back to some of the old songs that Jason and Brit did. One of those songs is Farther by Jason and Brit. And for this song, this was the first song that we recorded together with this new project. Brit and I had been in a band called Caution Tape, which this was a band that we put together in 2013. So it's been
10 years.
It's been about 10 years. So it's coming up on our sort of 10-year anniversary as partners in music. We met then and we decided to form this band because we all had similar songwriting interests, and also like we were saying earlier, Metric is one of our big influences. So we really bonded over that. And this first band was more of a keyboard driven band, but it had a little bit more of an organic feel. Like we were going for more like 1978 Cars rather than like 1984 Cars.
Got it.
So it was a little bit like kind of only keyboards, but not like as much synthy stuff. Kind of a little bit more on the like organic synths kind of sound.
Okay.
And there was no guitars. That was the thing. I was like, because I had been in a guitar pop band before, where I was like, I am tired of guitars. No guitars right now. I'm just gonna do keys. But then, once you can't just get rid of the guitars completely. It's just I started to miss it.
Well, and the synth does a lot, right? A synth fills in a lot of those gaps, but you're right. It is tricky with zero guitars, period, end of story.
Right. It was just like a stylistic choice that I made that maybe wasn't the best.
Well, I'm happy though that you did make it and it somehow led you to breaking off and forming Jason and Brit, because I really do love what you've done on Survival Skills, which we'll get to. And then this single that you chose, Farther. This one is such a cool song. And I have to ask, I know that it was recorded like March 2020-ish, late March 2020-ish. Did you write the song before or after the pandemic, or during? Was it pre, post, during? I was so curious as I was listening to it, where this came in relation to the pandemic.
Well, literally, it just came right as it happened. It happened as the pandemic happened. It was it was kind of crazy because I had started messing around with this little synth idea, and I posted it on Instagram, and I noticed one of the first comments was from Brit, and Brit and I had kind of like had a little pause in our friendship. We'd kind of like had some life changes and done some other stuff, and then she saw this thing that I posted on Instagram, and she was like, ooh. And it was just, all it was just a melody. I didn't have any words or anything. It was just like a melody thing that was like posted on Instagram, and she thought it was cool. And so I was like, hey, do you want to work on this thing? Because it sounded like something that she would be into. And so we kind of messed around with it a little bit, kind of made some lyrics, kind of honed it into a thing, and it started to sound pretty cool. So we called our friend Don Cento, who is a great producer, big
regular on the show here, frequent guest, Don Cento.
frequent guest and amazing musician and producer, and friend.
Yes.
But we called him and said, hey, he'd been looking for guys to come in and just kind of mess around in his studio. So we were like, we got a thing that we could do that with. So I think we had one session and then everything shut down.
Oh, wow. It's so, well, I was curious because the lyrics, like I love the sweet, sweet lyrics to the song. Like it starts, with don't be afraid to say what's on your mind when you love somebody. And I was like, oh, did that come like after being locked down for 3 weeks? Did it come before? I just thought that they were so sweet. And I love that. And I also love too, there's another line in the song that says, what's the point of forgetting the past if you only think about how it never lasts? And I was like, oh man, it just so oftentimes, we talk a lot about how songs sound different or they hit differently pre or post pandemic. And this one, I just thought it was so sweet. I had to know. I'm like, was it pre or post? And to know that it was like right in the eye of the storm, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. And I really think that kind of influenced how it ended up sounding. It was like, it kind of had this sad, but like hopeful kind of vibe to it. Mm-hmm. And I think it really kind of carried us through that really troubled time. It was just like being able to get together and work on this thing, even if for a brief time, and then we had to kind of take it online,
right?
But just being able to like come together and work on a thing that was positive in the midst of all that uncertainty was just really, really good. And like I'm glad you mentioned that one line about the past, because I think I wrote that line, and when I came up with it, I was like, does this make sense? Am I like trying to do some weird wordplay that really actually doesn't make sense or anything? Or if like people find that it does make sense, then that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's catchy. It's funny because I am such a studier of lyrics that it's really like maybe the most important part of a song to me. At least one of the top 3 most important parts of a song to me are the lyrics. And so I did, when I first read it, I was like, let me read it again. Let me read it again. But to me, that's a really good lyric, right? Like something that I pause on, that makes me think, that makes me want to go back and revisit it. So I loved it. I thought it worked. And then again, like knowing the time in the world that it happened makes it even that much more, meaningful. I think it just hits differently again, like I said. And so I love that. And I sort of spoiled all of my talking points in the intro, but definitely this is one of the songs that gave me major, like Human League vibes. If you don't mind the comparison,
no, not at all.
Stylistically, it felt a little bit like that, like an updated version of that to me. And, I'm such a huge like 80s music fan that anytime I get a chance at bringing back anything that sounds remotely like that time frame, I'm all in.
That's why I figured you and I would be a good fit for this podcast here.
Exactly.
For sure. Same here.
Well, and we kind of live in that spot as we transition into your next pick. Tell me about your second song.
My second pick is Electric Love by Night Traveler. They're actually from Austin, I found out. And I was introduced to them by a really good friend of mine, Noelle Hampton, who has an amazing band called the Bell Sounds here in Austin. Mm-hmm. She and I had really bonded over our love for kind of 80s synth pop stuff. And she kind of like went through a similar musical transition that I did, except she was kind of we kind of both went through it, I guess, at the same time, but she kind of like really took it and ran with it in the last couple of years. Like really just diving into those like real 80s inspired synth beats and just like producing all the stuff herself and her home studio. And, then working with her husband on, kind of fleshing out the ideas to kind of like, to kind of follow her journey to this like synth pop land. And so she had put together this like playlist of like these sort of like 80s inspired current bands so that, we could feel like we were all current, but listening to stuff that sounds like 30, 40 years ago.
But I love, and I like this song I loved. And it was so cinematic. You know what I mean? Like I'm a sucker for like a love montage in a movie. And like, that is why I was like, I've got to find a movie or a TV show now to feature this song. Like it brought me all of the like feels that I loved from like the power ballads. I wrote a note here. I said, it's like the big love ballads of the early aughts mixed with like an 80s love song. And the way that I wrote it out in my note is I don't know how this is going to go down, but we're going to try it here, Jason. It was like if Snow Patrol and Richard Marx had a baby. And it's a love child that I did not know I needed, right? But that's what it is. It's like the beauty and the longing of like those like super cheese that I also loved, Richard Marx songs of the day. And like, like a song like Chocolate, by Snow Patrol or something.
I do love that song. Yes.
Yes. And so that's like that when I was trying to think, I'm like, who do they sound like, or what can I compare it to sort of give like the listeners an idea? And that's it. I'm like, Snow Patrol and Richard Marx had a baby.
That's pretty good. I don't know if I would have come up with that, but yes, that's what I love about that band is that it's very cinematic, very much a vibe, like a whole vibe. Like
yes,
their other songs really do kind of have that. There's this one song called I Still Love You that starts out and it basically sounds exactly like Missing You or one of those.
Yeah.
But it starts out just like it, like the same kind of tones, the same, and that's what I love about them is they just have that vibe, but you can tell it's not like a pastiche or it's not like
they're not like a cover band. It feels like they're making their own material, but you can feel that heavy, heavy influence. And I love that. And I respect that because I think it's got to be so hard to do. You'll know better than me, but it seems like it could so easily go into like, cover band territory or parody, territory. And to maintain that balance of like, yes, I'm heavily influenced by this era and love this synth pop sound, but create new original material that is modern and relevant now. It's just, I'm so glad people are doing it. And I'm so glad there are bands in Austin so that we can go see them live doing it. Because it's such, I think there's also a wide age range of people that relate to that sound, whether it's people that are, our age that grew up with it, or now like the kids that are making music had parents that listened to this, and so I love how it's sort of all coming together and coming around again.
Yeah, because I think we're at a point just with the culture where anything goes. You can really just. It's not so much. I mean, sure, there will always be like the top 40 and like following the quote unquote trends, but like really, there's and the genre fracturing and all that stuff. It's very with Spotify and everything. It's just kind of like now it's just kind of like anything goes. Just do what you like, and if it moves people, then that's great.
Yeah. And in all ways. And I love the authenticity that comes with that. I think that's part of why music right now is ringing so authentic to me and sounding so like true and good. Because I think people are just doing what they love and they're following their passion. And that's always kind of been like my mantra in the back of my head for this show. Like, I want to bring music that I love, which is really almost all music. But, you know, like good music that I want to share. And I don't need to be, you know, Pitchfork or Consequence of Sound or, you know, Stereo Gum, where I only am interested in talking about like the hottest, best, latest. We do some of that, but I also really enjoy just talking about music that I love with other people that love music and hearing about the songs that they love and why they love them and what a song represents for them. Like, I love that authenticity seems to really be reigning supreme right now. And people are just doing the kind of music that they love. It's not so much like, ooh, it's taboo to go
or
80s
like,
right now.
Guilty pleasure. It's like, no,
Right.
it's just a pleasure.
Just pleasure.
There's no guilt involved.
Exactly. It's just a pleasure. Well, speaking of a pleasure, that takes me to my first pick, which is a song called Space by Jason and Brit. So I chose a song from your new EP, Survival Skills, which, as I mentioned, came out at the end of last year. I love this EP. It's 5 songs. It's like a 15-minute 80s snack. Like, it was so good. I felt like I just kept listening to it over and over and over because every time I listened, I would hear something different. And that is what is so magical for me. And I don't know if it's exclusive to like synth music. I don't know what it is about like synth pop, but I feel like the more you listen to it, the more you hear. Does that make sense? Or am I just making that up because I think that a synthesizer is such a complicated instrument?
No, it's totally true because there's a lot of layering and just kind of little hooks that kind of go into that. And that's actually one of the reasons I got more into synth pop, is because there's like more you can do, or at least there's more that I perceived that you could do with the instrument rather than just guitar, where you kind of have to, I don't know, other people may have other thoughts about this, but for me, guitar is limiting in the sense that there's only certain things you can kind of do with it, unless you're just going to try to completely not make it sound like a guitar, which in that
Right.
case, you might as well just use a synthesizer. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you know, for Jason and Brit, we use guitar in a very kind of accent kind of way, which I think is great, because then it not only like makes me less bored with the idea of a guitar, it also kind of makes me kind of think of like, oh, what's the purpose the guitar can have? You know what I mean? Instead of just jangling along in the background, which is what I kind of used to do back in the day. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but you know, that's just not what I wanted to do now. But yeah, you can add all kinds of little hooks and different sounds, and it opens up a whole palette, I think.
I think so too. And it was hard to pick again because I listened to the EP so much that I really started to fall in love with all the songs. But, Back to the Start, which opens the EP, is a great song. The song Survival Skills, the title track, is great. It was hard for me to choose between those two and this one, but I ultimately landed on this one. And I think too, I loved the comparison of like outer space and love. Like space sort of created that perfect like double entendre, because I get very outer spacey vibes from the song. And then it's speaking very clearly about space and sort of that space that's created in kind of at the end of a relationship is sort of what I interpreted it to mean. But I'm doing it again to you, Jason, but I'm calling out more lyrics that I loved.
No, by all means.
Which were, they can measure the distance to Venus, but they can't count the space in between us. And I was like, oh, just like a stab in the heart, like it got me.
Oh, thanks. I like that line too, because like you said, it can be like a stab in the heart, but it also is just completely ridiculous.
Yeah, but I like, again, for an 80s song, like I had, I had Scott Davis, actually, who you also know, on the show last week. And we were talking about another 80s band that we all love, Van Halen. And he was talking about how if somebody was like coming at him about the songwriting differences between Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth, I was like, started to shake my head. And then he said exactly what I was thinking, which is like, well, they're not really known for their amazingly deep and insightful lyrics. Yeah. So like an 80s song though, like, especially when you're talking about in the synth pop genre, I feel like they're like cleverness is almost par for the course. You know, if I'm listening to synth pop music, I'm expecting clever lyrics. And so I was really glad that Jason and Brit delivered on that for me.
I'm glad you like that. It was that song was, I'll tell you a couple of things about that song. That song was one of the hardest ones, or the hardest one to do for the EP for sure, because of all the little bells and whistles and getting everything to sound just so, because there was a lot going on. And as you can hear in the mix, there's a lot of different parts and transitions and things happening. So to get those all to kind of, and I mixed it myself. So it was kind of like,
wow.
It was one of those things where I'm like, this is testing the limits of what I can do. Like, do I need to get somebody in here to actually make this thing sound good? Because right now there was, like at one point I was like, right now this is just not working. But I think it eventually ended up kind of sounding like a thing. And so
it does.
It's one of the things I like about it too is that it kind of showcases me and Brit singing in the ways that we kind of do best. Like I'm doing this kind of shouty part, and then she kind of comes in with this like little sort of gentle sort of like, hold on kind of like vibe, like, which I think is really like the hallmark of our thing, because I've always liked bands that kind of do that back and forth, especially between male and female voices. There's a lot you can do there, I feel like, as far as like the just the moods and things you can do.
Yeah, agreed. And like the characters that you can assume too, kind of,
Right.
So I love that too. Will, that's actually a very lovely transition into my next pick. So if this song is about sort of the demise of a relationship, or the, space that's committed, that's found, between two people, and space is the metaphor, then my next pick is about love and who you want to be next to at the end of the world. And it's a song called All Comes Crashing by Metric.
Great song.
Yeah, I love, first off, like listening to Brit's last name is Woods, so it's Brit Woods. Her voice reminded me so much of Emily Haynes from Metric. And so I found myself, back probably 2013, 2014, I was listening to a ton of Metric, a ton of Ms. Mister, like all the time. And then I kind of put both bands away, but I listened to them a lot. And what's funny is that after listening to Jason and Brit, I went back to Metric again, because Brit's voice so much reminded me of Emily Haynes. And I went back to this song specifically, which I found at the end of last year. I think it came out at the end of last year. I think it was new when I first heard it. And it was funny that like after listening to it again, after having taken a deep dive into Jason and Brit, it really had me longing for a male voice to join in. I've never missed that before when listening to Metric or this song, but I was like, oh man, wouldn't it be so cool if a male voice came in right now and sort of supplemented what she's doing here? So even though I think, Metric is an influence for you guys, or, that certainly the comparisons are drawn, I felt like I was left wishing Metric sounded a little bit more like Jason and Brit.
Wow, that's a first, I'm sure.
Well, and again, I felt like even some of the, like lyrically, it sounded really similar. She has a great line in the song that says, "When push it comes to shove, we do not fall out of love. We double down, we do not fade." And I love that lyric, and I felt like it could be from one of your songs, like it felt really similar to some of these other lyrics that I've called out in terms of like, its cheekiness or its cleverness, or, the double entendre, or, whatever else you want to to pull out of that phrase. But it did feel like it's a lyric that could have been in a Jason and Brit song too.
Well, thank you.
Who does? Is there like, do you guys just sort of come up with songs together? Do you primarily focus on music and Brit writes a lot? How does that work for you guys typically?
Well, we've been doing a lot more writing together, which has been really good. We collaborated on 4 songs recently for this songwriting group that I was a part of starting from last year. Wonderful musician named Dave Madden has started this group like 5 years ago, I think. And there's a bunch of songwriters, including my friend Noel, and we all have to do one song every 2 weeks for 8 weeks.
Oh, and wow.
So it's 4 songs, and it's a real challenge, and it's really fun though too, because you get to, at the end of it, have all these new songs and hear what everyone else has created, which from some of the prompts, it's just like, wow, everyone's brain picks out different things, and you just are amazed at the amount of talent that Austin has and your friends have. But
yeah.
It was fun, and we actually got to, collaborate a little bit more. Me as a married but no child guy, I tend to have a little bit more time, so I can be, a little bit more nose to the grindstone about things. But when Brit has time to help me out, she really, is able to come up with some stuff, and we were able to come up with some pretty cool songs for this next EP. So it just kind of depends. Whoever's got the idea, we just kind of put them together. But we both kind of have the same, or starting to have kind of the same brain about stuff. So it's kind of good. Like, we've been working together for a while now. So it helps that that kind of familiarity is helping us, I think.
Well, and I'm glad that you shared the process. Thank you, because it feels like it's a collaboration when you guys are singing. Sometimes you hear a song and it can be a great song, but you feel like you can tell, especially, in male, female bands or bands that have more than one lead singer. You can sometimes tell like, oh, one person wrote the music, one person wrote the lyrics. And it felt really collaborative when I was listening, at least to the Survival Skills album. Well, and farther too, though, it felt like a true collaboration. And I loved that about it too. When you were listening, it feels like I could feel that you guys were friends, and you guys almost have like shorthand with one another in terms of, have like a familiarity. And so I liked that. It came across in the music to me.
Oh, good. Yeah. That's what we're trying to get, is sort of this, the whole project is really just, 2 friends doing music that they both like. And that's really kind of the whole thing.
And I can't think of a better reason to set up a band, right? Yeah. Like 2 friends doing music they like.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing what you're listening to this week. To learn more about Jason and listen to Jason and Brit's new album, visit www.jasonandbrit.band. And that's JASONandBrit.band. jasonandbrit.band. The album is also available on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you stream. And as always, please be sure to follow, download, and share this episode with everyone you know and all the people you'd like to know, because music is a great way to connect. Last but not least, to stay informed on all things Super Awesome Mix and What Are You Listening To, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix. Thanks again for listening, and please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.